Okay, we had a little look at some background, principles, ideologies, philosophies, whatever you want to say. Yeah, headspace, emotional management, this sort of thing. We'll come back to those things because, as I will reiterate again and again, without your full health recovery, it's a non-starter. You got to be on tip-top form because where we're going here, into the guts of it, a bit more practicalities. We start looking at the actual law courts, how to approach this enormous area, which is a systemic, is a global issue. These are national law courts, if you like, and they're major, significant corporate entities. They call themselves legal entities, but as we'll get into here, much more sensible and practical to think of them as business entities, because it's all about the money. The motivation is the money. So whether you think that's good or whether you think that's bad, as we spoke about in previous videos, is irrelevant. This is how it works. The motivation of these law courts is filthy lucre, money, getting the revenue, getting the income. There's a huge economic sector. I've heard plenty of stats, but it's in the billions annually just here in the UK. So what it is globally annually is a massive question. Tens of billions of pounds change hands annually within the UK, making family law the most profitable area of law courts. And the commodity, when I say it's a trading operation, the commodity is children. And a lot of people will find this very difficult to believe, that in flag-waving Great Britain, where the BBC media paints it as such a wonderful place to live, as opposed to the sort of barbaric other places in the world. We're supposed to feel very grateful for being British, but as we'll find, the British authorities have it's a mafia-style operation, where they have this presentation, this projection of ethical and moral high ground, when in fact what's happening is they need a steady stream, a supply. That's a really interesting word when it comes to psychology. They need a supply of people, children, to come into law courts to create a squabble, create an argument, and then from that they can profit. And there's other areas too, whether it's care homes or foster homes or social services, this kind of people. There's a lot of money that the state and the system involves itself with, trades with, involving family law courts and the severing of children from parents in whatever guise and form that may be. We could get into the real dark stuff, the actual child trafficking and all the hideous sort of VIP criminality that goes on under the radar because of the glass ceiling. But that's another video. We're here at your attitudes and an entry, if you like, into the world of family law and whether or not to be involved with it at all. I spent personally a year in family law. There were 3 hearings in 2015 with which I involved myself with, and it became very clear that none of my defensive points were being taken, and it was, aside from helping me get closer to my children, doing quite the opposite. We can get into the areas of Kafkas and this kind of thing, perhaps in a different video, and to the reasons or the methodology with which they used to justify keeping me away from my children. But it was clear after 11 or so months that this was a non-starter, a mirage, a smokescreen. It wasn't really doing what it said on the tin in terms of offering justice, fairness, and child protection. It's completely inverted. And so we get to this area of inversion. So the question is, if you're putting your money into this system, whether that be with a law firm or however you look to represent yourself, you're funding, you're helping the machine, this fueling of this hideous machine, that's purpose is to generate money, profit from separating more and more kids. So I'm prepared for us to disagree on this one if required. We can agree to disagree, but my personal stance on it is, after my experiences, don't go near family law courts. Don't fuel them. We need to starve them or suffocate them of their lifeblood, which is money. So if people are going and spending, 5, 10, 15,000 pounds on legal representation and defence, in order to win their hat or their status as parent back, we got to go back a step and say, well, hang on, how have they taken the justification of removing that status as parent before they try and sell it back to you? It's a sort of ransom operation where they have taken the children and then trying to ransom them back in a sort of hostage situation, but all obviously looking all bells and whistles and frills because it's Her Majesty's legal service. So how can they do any wrong? They have this reputation of being the law. Don't take the law into your own hands, they say. Well, when you look at the options between this HM civil law and what used to be in the case, what they claim to take their basis from, which is common law, the difference is huge. There's an enormous chasm between these two types of law, and yet civil law, the one we use, takes its references allegedly from common law. And as we dig now into the basis of the statutes, the principles of law, we see that very starkly. So here we go. When I went into my first family law hearing, I had no idea about law. I just kind of trusted and hoped that there was good in Britain and good in these professionals, and good would come of it, and it would be a quick couple of months, open and shut case. I'd be back with my boys, and the lies and the defamation of character and this kind of thing would be shown up by these able professionals who would sort the thing out. Of course, not a bit of it was to turn out like that. And here's my suggestion. In order for there to be a law court, you cannot call together a forum of law with just an accusation. There needs to be evidence to back up that accusation so that the person that's being accused, the defendant, has evidence from which to defend him or herself. So in my case, for example, the accusation that was levelled at me was a lie, and therefore there was no evidence with which to back that up. So I should have, in hindsight, stayed away from family law courts, saying I'm not going anywhere near a law court, until I have some evidence to enter this law court and defend myself from. I'm still waiting 5 years later, since 2014, for some evidence against me to be presented, and as there is none, that's unlikely to happen. So personally, I'm in a bit of a stalemate. I'm waiting for there to be a sea change in this whole situation, because I've seen the mask slip on UK law, and I'm to say I'm hugely unimpressed is a massive understatement. There's nothing there apart from a bunch of sort of sociopathic breadhead criminals who have no desire to help children or see justice. Perhaps there's one or two, but I haven't come across them personally. And it's a hog feeding trough, over the carcass of a broken family. It's very, very vulgar environment. And similarly with the UK election, I hold the two administrative forums in similar contempt. I don't involve myself in elections because Westminster is similarly a transnational criminal organisation, as passed by an international common law court. And so let's look why. Why are these civil law courts, these family law courts, in principle illegal? Because they are. These courts, have no basis of legitimacy whatsoever. Because, first up, there is no jury. If you dig into common law that's been in the basis of law for hundreds of years, it's all about the jury. The judge is less important than the jury in a proper law court, in a common law court. So there's a number of areas where these courts are illegal. They fail to reach the standards required of a legitimate forum of law, a law court. First up is the jury system. Common law holds the jury, 12 people, as the pinnacle of the forum and of the decision making of the verdict. A judge is there just to help the jury in terms of the mechanics of the court. A judge can't tell any jury to strike a witness's testament from the record. The judge doesn't have the captain of the ship idea that, sometimes called admiral law, but civil law, canon law, this kangaroo law that we use, has a judge that can, decide that a jury can't take certain things that are presented by a witness into account. So the whole jury system is vitally important. It removes the chances of corruption. If you've got one judge eminently corruptible, if you've got 12 randomly chosen members of the public as a jury, justice comes through the sum of the parts, if you like. 12 parts makes the truth much more likely to transpire. So don't go into a court without a jury is a very good principle to take. Another one is don't go into a secret court. Now, Ken Clarke is a Conservative politician, and he's under accusation. Well, there's a lot of evidence from a guy called Ben Fellows, for sexual misconduct, sexual abuse when he was a child. So Ken Clarke is, under the cosh himself with regards to child abuse, kind of wrapped up in this whole VIP scandal. And he was the guy, when he was Lord Chief Justice, who brought in these secret courts. Okay, so we got a potential child molester who's making laws about, child custody and child protection, this kind of stuff from a legal perspective. So already it stinks. And Ken Clarke created these secret law courts where there is no scrutiny. Now, it's another thing about common law, that law courts have to be public, so that the public can see loud and clear how law is being carried out in their culture, environment, society. And yet what's happened here is Ken Clarke has shut the doors on family law courts, and there's no gallery for the press or the public. Nobody can come in and see what's going on. So if there are massive injustices, and there are massive injustices, they're getting away with it because of the secrecy, the closed door aspect of these courts. So already there's two really big reasons why family law should be avoided at all costs. The next one is defence representation. Interestingly, common law, you don't need lawyers. There's no money involved in common law because money is a corrupting variable. If you have people being paid and there being money changing hands with regards to law, then it's eminently corruptible, and things, priorities can move away from justice and the truth. And so this idea of representation is only civil canon law, civil law, admiralty law, the law that is currently in operation with family laws. And so in the common law, all witnesses and all defendants and all people on the stand have to speak from their own self. They can't employ somebody to speak for them. And actually, there's quite obvious reasons why that should be, because if a dodgy individual gets someone to speak fabulously, then you can sway a jury because someone else is doing the talking. There's a lot more truth that emanates sort of energetically out of a person. So common law says all witnesses do their own talking, all defendants do their own talking. And yet in family law court, this legal aid side of things, there is no representation for the defendants. So, for example, in my case again, there was an accusation made against me. I was turfed out of my home and my livelihood, had no money at all, trying to scratch around a few fivers for breakfast as opposed to trying to find legal representation, and scraped together enough to get what was called a Mackenzie friend, which is sort of like a half lawyer or not quite a lawyer. And so I paid for him, but he wasn't even allowed to speak in the court because he wasn't a proper lawyer, even though he was qualified to be one. And yet the other side of the court case, there was the most prestigious lawyer of southwest England, Stone King firm from Bath, who was, you know, singing from the song sheets left, right, and centre. So that whole skewed area of representation was seemingly, you know, very, very important with regards to how it went. And then finally, the last area where common law is different from family law, civil law, is, let's check the notes here. So we got no jury, evidence presented, secret courts. Oh no, the evidence presented, I think, is the other one I haven't said. Yeah, you can't have a court case unless evidence is presented. I think I mentioned this already. You know, there's an inversion going on where what should be happening is that us as defendants who haven't had any evidence presented against us to defend ourselves should be just going, this isn't a court case. You know, there's no evidence against me. You know, I could accuse anybody of starting World War I or whatever, but unless there's evidence, you know, investigated evidence that's been pulled together to defend myself against, then, you know, there's no point in me being here as a defendant because I'm still waiting for something to defend myself against. You know, if you're coming from that place where innocent until proven guilty, but they've inverted that because they've said that you are guilty, come in and prove that you're not guilty. So you're trying to, you know, find proof to show that nothing's happened, which, you know, is quite difficult to do if you think about it. And this inversion is that kind of like gaslighting, which, you know, really throws you when you're in the depths of despair, having lost your children anyway, and then you find that the legal system, which you were kind of counting on to get reunited with your kids, is worse than a shambles. It's a criminal syndicate, you know, of extortion and ransoming children. Basically, is what's going on. And so these you know areas. This is what triggers you. You know, talk about emotions in a previous video. This can take you down where the belief system that you may well have had for most of your life, where that, you know, Britain is fair and, you know, the truth comes out, and, you know, stiff upper lip, we're a noble kind of nation, and this kind of stuff goes completely out the window, and you're faced with the stark reality that the mask has slipped, and you're in this, you know, sort of den of lies and injustice, and nobody really cares. So, you know, the descent, if you like, in terms of enthusiasm and well-being is massively significant in these early stages when, you know, you're experimenting with the potentials of family law. Yeah, so you know, hopefully this can give you a bit of preparation for this sort of thing if you're fresh into this, and do not count on truth and justice coming out of a British law court because it's a British law court. You know, you could be in for a very sharp knock in terms of surprises.